Welcome to a world where trust shatters, love turns into betrayal, and family bonds unravel in ways no one ever expects. Here, nothing is as it seems. Behind the smiles hide secret glances, whispers of forbidden desire, and the kind of lies that cut deeper than any blade. These are not just stories of heartbreak. They are tales of betrayal within the very walls meant to protect, where a husband's promises and a sister's loyalty collide and collapse into shocking truths. Every twist pulls you deeper, from the pain that burns into strength, to revenge carried out with silent precision, until the final twist leaves everyone haunted by the price of hidden secrets. If you crave raw emotions, shocking revelations, and unforgettable family drama, you're in the right place. Stay, because each story here will leave you questioning just how far betrayal can really go. When loyalty within the home collides with the bloodline itself, trust doesn't just break, it explodes into fragments sharp enough to slice through every tender memory once held dear. It begins with the small things, moments too subtle to question, yet too heavy to ignore. Late night conversations whispered behind closed doors, a shift in warmth that was once unshakable, and glances exchanged that carried far more weight than simple affection between family. At first, it seems unthinkable. The mind fights against the possibility, clinging to the belief that blood and vows are sacred, untouchable, immune to betrayal. But the truth always has a way of clawing its way to the surface, and when it does, it leaves scars that never fade. The betrayal was not from a stranger, not from someone easily dismissed or erased. It came from within the walls of the home, from the very place where safety and unity should have been untouchable. A sister, once the keeper of secrets, the mirror of childhood laughter, the one who should have stood as protector rather than destroyer, and a husband sworn in front of vows and promises to cherish, protect, and remain loyal. Together, they created the kind of wound that tears not just through the heart, but through the soul of a family. Every memory of growing up alongside her became poisoned, every smile twisted into something darker. The bond of blood was supposed to be unshakable, the kind that would outlast storms, jealousy, and the sharp edges of life. Yet when that bond collided with the sacred vows of marriage, the impact was catastrophic. Nothing could prepare for the silence that followed, the silence that wasn't peace, but the suffocating quiet of a trust already dead. The days that followed became heavy with shadows. The air itself felt tainted, carrying the weight of lies that hung unspoken, but were felt in every corner. A marriage that once stood tall now trembled on its foundation, and a sisterhood once unbreakable became a battlefield of guilt, denial, and hidden desire. The betrayal wasn't just an act. It was a theft, stealing years of loyalty, robbing love of its purity, and turning family into strangers overnight. There is a particular cruelty in realizing that the two people trusted most were the ones who destroyed everything. Their choices didn't just break one heart. They tore apart the very meaning of family, and once the truth surfaced, there was no going back. The bond of blood and vows had been shattered, and in its place grew something colder, sharper, and unyielding, the fire of betrayal that would not be silenced. What once appeared to be harmless smiles slowly began to carry a weight too heavy to ignore. At first, it seemed like nothing. Simple glances passed across the room, quick bursts of laughter at moments that didn't feel funny to anyone else. They hid it well, disguising their connection beneath the ordinary rhythms of family gatherings and daily life. But the eyes never lie. Eyes reveal what the lips are too afraid to say, and every time they locked onto each other, the silence around them grew louder until it became impossible not to hear the whispers hiding inside those glances. The realization didn't come all at once. It came like slow poison, dripping into the veins one drop at a time, a touch that lingered a fraction longer than it should have, a shared joke that excluded everyone else. The way his gaze softened in her direction, not with the warmth of brotherly affection, but with something deeper, something forbidden. Each moment piled upon the next, and the truth began to stitch itself together without a single word being spoken. At night, the mind replayed every scene in painful detail. The smiles, the gestures, the fleeting touches. What once felt innocent began to look like evidence, a puzzle that had been scattered for too long finally forming a picture too ugly to deny. Those hidden glances became daggers, cutting through the heart and leaving wounds invisible to anyone else. Outwardly, everything looked intact, family dinners, conversations, laughter, but underneath the surface, the foundation had already cracked. The worst part was not just what was seen, but what was felt. Instinct screamed louder than reason. No matter how desperately the truth wanted to be buried, those eyes told a different story. Eyes filled with desire, guilt, and an intimacy that should have never existed. Each stolen glance was a confession, silent but undeniable. They thought it was subtle, thought no one could see past their charade, but the truth was screaming in every look they shared. Every time they locked eyes, it was like watching betrayal unfold in plain sight. The looks spoke of nights that didn't belong to the marriage, of secrets whispered in the dark, of promises made where loyalty should have lived. The betrayal wasn't spoken aloud, but it didn't need to be. The truth was already there, flashing like a cruel light between the spaces of silence. It was in those glances that the deepest betrayal was revealed, not in words, not in actions, but in the undeniable language of desire and guilt. And once seen, it could never be unseen. Betrayal is brutal in any form, but when it comes from within the walls that were supposed to protect and shelter, it becomes unbearable. A marriage is built on vows spoken with conviction, promises made in the presence of love and faith. Family is bound by blood, ties that should never fracture. But when those two sacred bonds collide in betrayal, the entire foundation collapses like sand slipping through the fingers. It begins with trust so deep it feels unshakable, and ends with the realization that nothing was ever safe. The collapse didn't arrive with a loud crash. It came quietly, like rot beneath the surface of a strong house, unseen until the walls gave way. There were moments that now play back with clarity, moments once dismissed as nothing. The late night calls that ended abruptly when the room was entered, the laughter shared between them that didn't sound like family, but like lovers bound by secrets. At the time, excuses were easy. It's just closeness, just comfort. But the heart knows when something is wrong, even before the mind dares to name it. And then the truth revealed itself, and it was far worse than any nightmare imagined. A sister, blood of the same blood, a mirror of childhood, a confidant through every storm, sharing what should have been untouchable, and a husband, the man who swore in sacred vows to remain faithful, to build a life of loyalty and love. Together they tore apart everything, as if those vows and bonds meant nothing at all. The discovery felt like being swallowed by quicksand. Every attempt to grasp for stability only pulled deeper into the suffocating realization that nothing was real anymore. Family dinners became charades, smiles became masks, every word they spoke felt laced with lies. It wasn't just a betrayal of the heart, but a betrayal of blood, a tearing apart of two sacred trusts that should never have crossed. The home that once echoed with love now felt like a battlefield of whispers, glances, and shadows that mocked every memory once cherished. The weight of it pressed against the chest like an anchor. To lose a marriage is one kind of grief. To lose a sister in the same moment is another entirely. And yet, it wasn't only about loss. It was about being forced to see the truth stripped bare, to witness the selfishness of two people willing to destroy everything for desire. The walls of the family home, once filled with warmth, now held the coldest truth imaginable, that love and loyalty had been traded for betrayal. when marriage collapsed within those family walls, it didn't just end a union. It shattered the meaning of family itself. Every moment of heartbreak carried its own weight, pressing down until it felt impossible to breathe. The betrayal had cut deep, leaving wounds that no apology could ever close. At first, the pain consumed everything. Nights were spent staring into the dark, searching for answers that never came. Days passed in silence, with questions echoing louder than any words spoken aloud. How could love, sworn before the world, be discarded so carelessly? How could blood, bound by family, turn into the sharpest blade? The sorrow was unbearable, but inside that sorrow, something else began to stir. Weakness turned into fire. Each tear that fell no longer represented defeat, but fuel. The pain that once threatened to break became the very force that hardened resolve. It became clear that there was no choice but to rise, to take back dignity piece by piece, and to make sure the betrayal did not define the story. What was stolen would not be the end. What was broken would not remain shattered. From the ashes of heartbreak, determination was born. Every lie replayed in the mind became a reason to grow stronger. Every stolen glance remembered became a reminder of what could no longer be tolerated. The hurt transformed into clarity, stripping away illusions that had once blinded the truth. The marriage had been a prison disguised as love, and the bond with a sister had been poisoned long before the truth was revealed. What once seemed unthinkable now became undeniable. Both had chosen betrayal, and both would learn what it meant to underestimate the strength of the one they had deceived. There was a shift in silence. The quiet no longer belonged to despair, but to strategy. Dignity was no longer something fragile to be guarded. It became a weapon. They thought betrayal had left behind nothing but weakness, but in reality, it had forged something far more dangerous. Resolve sharpened by fire. What they had taken for granted would become their downfall. Every act of betrayal had written its own consequence. Every whispered lie had already planted the seeds of justice. The pain that once suffocated now burned bright, fierce enough to cut through the web of deceit they had woven. No longer a victim, no longer silent, no longer fragile. The fire within had only one purpose left: to pierce through their lies and reclaim everything stolen. The pain no longer destroyed. The pain transformed, and in its transformation, it became unstoppable. Not every strike needs to echo through walls or shatter glass to be felt. Sometimes the sharpest blows are delivered in silence, where no one hears the sound of the dagger sliding between the ribs of betrayal. After the storm of discovery passed and the tears dried into hardened resolve, the path forward became clear. Loud revenge only feeds the guilty with attention, but silent precision cuts deeper, leaving wounds they cannot hide from anyone, not even themselves. Each step was measured, each move chosen with care. No words of confrontation, no wild accusations. That would have been too easy for them, giving them the chance to twist the story, to wear masks of innocence in front of others. Instead, patience became the greatest weapon. Lies were allowed to continue, not because they were unseen, but because every lie spoken became another thread in the web being spun around them. Small truths were released like drops of poison in water, subtle but devastating. A misplaced detail here, a whispered observation there, until the cracks in their facade began to widen in front of the very people they wanted to deceive. Their secret world began to crumble without a single direct accusation, because silence left them unbalanced, always wondering how much was known and how much was still hidden. The beauty of silent revenge lies in its unpredictability. They expected anger, perhaps even begging, but not stillness. They mistook the calm for weakness, never realizing that it was the calm of someone who had already decided their fate. Each quiet choice dismantled them piece by piece. Opportunities they depended on slipped away. Trust they once held from others dissolved without explanation. What had been carefully built in secrecy unraveled, not with an explosion, but with the quiet, merciless pull of gravity. The sister, who once stood so proudly, basking in the thrill of stolen desire, found herself isolated, her image stained by whispers she could never wash away. The husband, who once believed loyalty could be broken without consequence, felt the walls close in as his carefully balanced life toppled beneath the weight of unspoken truth. Every victory they thought they had stolen became hollow. Every moment of secrecy turned into evidence of their downfall. Revenge, when woven with silent precision, does not need to announce itself. It reveals itself in the way their eyes shift nervously, in the way their laughter fades when silence lingers too long, in the way their own choices rise up to strangle them. And when the last thread tightened, when everything they had built together collapsed under the weight of their own betrayal, there was no need for words. The sweetest revenge had already spoken in silence. When truth finally came to the surface, it didn't arrive with shouting or chaos. It came with the quiet force of something undeniable, the kind of truth that cannot be twisted, denied, or buried any longer. For so long, their betrayal had lived in the shadows, protected by lies and silence, but shadows always fade when light finally breaks through. The moment it all unraveled was not about catching them in an act. It was about watching the weight of their own choices crush them in front of everyone who once believed their masks. The punishment was never about screaming revenge or throwing everything into flames. It came in the exposure itself, the way every secret they tried to keep hidden became a mirror too sharp to look into. A husband who once held the image of loyalty and love was stripped bare, his charm replaced with shame, his confidence crumbling into fear. A sister who once played the role of family's pride became nothing more than the symbol of betrayal, her smile now seen as venom, her closeness now remembered as deceit. They were no longer who they pretended to be. The truth had destroyed the characters they built, leaving only the hollow reality behind. And yet, the ending was not just about punishment. It was about the haunting lesson left in the ashes of everything they broke. Love, when misused, becomes a weapon sharper than hate. Family, when betrayed, leaves scars deeper than any enemy could inflict. Secrets, when buried too long, always find their way to the surface, and when they do, they demand a price heavier than anyone is prepared to pay. The quiet satisfaction did not come from watching them fall. It came from surviving what they tried to destroy. Strength rose from the very pain they created, dignity reclaimed from the ashes of their betrayal. They thought they had written the final chapter, but the twist was theirs to face, not mine to carry. The love they betrayed was gone, but the power they thought they had stolen slipped through their fingers, leaving them with nothing but each other, a bond built on lies too toxic to last. The truth had surfaced, and with it, the final twist no one expected. They destroyed themselves. Thank you for watching this story of betrayal, heartbreak, and the kind of revenge no one saw coming. Every glance, every lie, and every secret exposed brought us closer to a truth that could never stay hidden. If this story kept you on edge and made you feel the weight of every twist and turn, don't leave just yet. Hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next unforgettable chapter of hidden betrayals and shocking family truths. Until then, remember, sometimes the silence holds the loudest revenge.